Are you struggling to get your first PUBG win? Keep making it to that final circle but always falling short? Don't worry, in this video we're going to be discussing what's needed to get that chicken dinner. Stick around to find out more. So why is winning your first PUBG match so tough? PUBG isn't just about shooting, it's about positioning, decision making and strategy. And this is where it differs from your Warzone and Fortnite and stuff like that. Warzone, you've always got to get out a free jail card. You've got broken movement with slide cancelling. You've got zip lines all over the map. Fortnite, you've got shockwaves. You've got rifts. You have like updates where they have the portal guns and stuff like that. All of these things are like a fail safe where if you make a mistake, a lot of the time you can get out of that. PUBG, you make a mistake and 9 times out of 10, you're dead. You're back to the lobby. Many new players make critical mistakes like landing in hot zones and dying too quickly, looting too long instead of getting into position, taking bad fights and getting caught in the open, panicking in the final circles and losing control. What we'll discuss in this video is the best landing spots to avoid early eliminations, how to loot efficiently and get the best gear fast, positioning and movement strategies to stay safe, how to pick fights wisely and when to avoid combat, endgame tactics to clutch the final fight and secure your first win. We're going to relate this to Vikendi mostly, just because of the gameplay in the background, but most of it transfers across all maps. I'd also note that I'm not an expert. I've played my fair share of BRs and I've played PUBG for a while now, but I'm still learning. A key component to learning though is to discuss, which is why I thought I'd make this video, to share my thoughts and processes, and then others can add to this in the comments below, share their thoughts, share their theories and how they would play throughout the game. Stick around and by the end of this video, hopefully you'll have a better understanding of how to dominate your first PUBG victory. Choosing the right landing spot can make or break your match. Landing the wrong place and you'll be fighting for your life with little to no gear, but pick a smart spot and you'll have the loot, positioning and safety needed to make it to the final circles. If you're a beginner, stay away from hot zones like Castle, Villa, Train Station and Cosmodrome. These areas are packed with players, making survival a gamble. Of course, this is all in relation to the flight path. The closer to the flight path a location is, the hotter that drop will be. Just like if it's early in the flight path, it's going to be hotter than if it's at the end of the flight path. So you need to check that map to see where you're going to land before you jump from the plane. Instead of hot zones, aim for small compounds or mid-tier towns that offer solid loot without heavy competition. Some options for that is Mavatra. Good loot, minimal early fights. Critchus, decent gear, away from hot zones. Dino Park, which has scattered loot and easy rotations. Cement Factory, which has got lots of periphery buildings, high tier loot without immediate action. And Trevno, which is far to the east, safe landing with vehicles nearby. Once you've jumped, don't just head straight down. Keep your eyes on other parachutes. Are multiple squads heading to your location? If so, adjust your landing slightly to avoid early fights. Look around mid-air while parachuting to see where others are landing, especially once the chute is pulled. You can free look without changing your heading. Look behind, right, left, below and above. If someone is landing near where you are, ping where they land so you can reference that for your rotations and looting. If a lot of players are dropping near your location, consider diverting to a quieter spot nearby. Land slightly outside towns and loot up before heading in. Big streamers and sweats hate this, but it's a tactical advantage. You've looted up in peace while they're in carnage. You then go in and clean up the dregs and eliminate them after they've collected all the good loot for you. So to recap, avoid hot zones like Castle and Cosmodrome and land in mid-tier towns or small compounds for safe looting. Always scan for enemies landing nearby and adjust accordingly. Now that we've got your landing strategy down, let's move on to looting smartly and gearing up fast. Landed safely, it's time to loot up fast. The right gear can make all the difference between surviving the first fight or getting sent back to the lobby. Let's go over what you need to grab and how to loot efficiently. So in terms of gear to prioritize, I always like to get a helmet and a vest as soon as possible. Ideally, that wants to be level 2 or above. A level 2 helmet protects against headshots and a level 2 vest helps you survive more bullets. Don't set off a level 1 if you can upgrade quickly. Your backpack wants to be level 2 or 3. Obviously, if you've just landed and there's a level 1 right there in front of you, grab it. Because once you've picked your gun up, if you don't have a backpack, you're going to be limited on how much munitions you can store. Okay, so the backpack is essential. You need enough space for ammo, meds, and throwables. Level 2 is a must, but if you find a jammer pack, even better. That'll protect you from the blue zone and doesn't cost anything in terms of storage. However, I'd swap the jammer pack out if I find a level 3 pack. In terms of medical supplies, grab at least 5 bandages, 3 first aid kits, and some painkillers and energy drinks. I normally like to grab 4 painkillers and 4 energy drinks. Boosters help keep you in the fight for longer. They're the ones that are going to boost that health up as you're fighting. So always stock up on those. If you're coming across an adrenaline syringe, I normally burn those straight away. So if I see an adrenaline syringe, I'll take it and I'll use it straight away, just because they do take a long time to use. So they're not really useful mid-combat. In terms of weapons, your weapons should give you versatility for both close range and long range fights. Just to note, when looting your weapons, if you right click the weapon and then drag the ammunitions across, it is faster. I don't know why, but if you do, feel free to explain it in the comments. For a primary, I'll run an assault rifle such as the M4, the AKM, the AUG, or preferably I like to run an SMG such as the YUMP, MP5K, or the Vector. In my humble opinion, the MP5 is absolutely broken. The hipfire is obscene at the moment. ARs have a good balance of power and range, best for mid-range combat. SMGs are great for close quarters fights inside buildings, and with the recent buff are good for mid-range too. A lot of people run SMGs now, including myself. For a secondary, you want a sniper such as the Kar 98 or the M24, or a DMR such as the MK12 or the Dragunov. Snipers let you pick off enemies from a distance. They are one-shot headshot at range against a level 2 helmet. If they have a level 3 helmet, they aren't one-shot. DMRs have a slightly less firepower, but a much faster fire rate, so you can spam those shots a lot more. If you find a sniper and a good scope, it's a great choice for Vikendi's open areas. Don't loot too long. Move out. One of the biggest mistakes beginners make is looting for too long. The longer you stay in one spot, the more likely you are to get ambushed. Prioritize essentials. Don't waste time sorting through unnecessary items. Move quickly from building to building, always checking your surroundings. If you have a decent loadout, stop looting and reposition. Don't get greedy. Focus on level 2 plus gear, meds and ammo first. Right now, I'd say the best beginner loadout is the MP5K and the M24. SMG hipfire is obscene, and the M24 has very little bullet drop, so at range you don't have to worry so much about bullet drop. Don't waste time looting up, get what you need and move. As a self-confessed loot goblin, this is an area I in particular definitely need to improve on. I'm always trying to find slightly better loot than I've already got, and a lot of time it's just not necessary, but it's an area I'm working on and trying to improve. Now that you've geared up, let's talk about positioning and how to stay ahead of the enemy. Looting is important, but smart positioning is what separates winners from the rest. If you're constantly running in the open or getting caught by the zone, you won't last long. Let's talk about how to stay ahead of the game by planning your movements and using the terrain wisely. You want to be always watching the zone. As soon as the first circle appears, check where you are and plan your next move. Being stuck outside the zone forces you to make risky moves, so stay ahead of it. What that means is always keeping an eye on the timer. Don't wait until the last second to move. If you're far from the safe zone, start rotating early to avoid getting caught by the blue zone. If you're inside the zone early, position yourself in a strong area rather than just sitting in the open. Try and avoid being an edger. People use the zone edge because they feel protected by the blue zone, but depending on the phase of the game, people will be in the blue. So I try to settle in the center of zone as much as possible, camping a building, because I can then defend that building easily and I'm not having to constantly watch my back. Not only that, but if you are in the center of the zone is more likely to pull to you than if you're on the edge of zone. So that means less rotations, less moving around, less risk. You want to use cover and high ground to your advantage. Vikendi is full of open areas, and so is PUBG in general. And if you're running in the middle of a snowy field, you're an easy target. Instead, always move from cover to cover. I have a terrible habit of just running through the center of open fields, largely just because I'm lazy and I can't bother rotating properly. But if you are after the win and you seriously want that win, you need to be using cover as much as possible. Your best cover options, of course, are rocks and trees. These are just natural, they're in the map as a default. Buildings and compounds, great for holding positions, but be careful of campers. Yeah, just like I was just talking about, you're gonna get campers in buildings. It's just natural. And of course, you want the high ground. It gives a better view of enemies and makes you harder to hit. But not just that. When you are in a fight, you are at a much better advantage than they are, because there's a higher chance of you getting a headshot on them because you are shooting them from above, whereas they have your whole body before they get to your head. If you must cross an open area, run in a zigzag pattern and use smoke grenades if needed. Stick to ridges and natural terrain instead of flat ground. This is particularly important for end zone, which we'll get to in a minute. But PUBG is full of undulations in the ground, and it's amazing how well you can use those as cover. People don't realize that, but a lot of the time there's just natural cover in the way that the land is laid ahead of you. Vehicles can save you from the zone, but they can also expose you. So here's how to use them in what my opinion is in the best way. If the zone is far and you have to move quickly, use a vehicle. Also use vehicles to rotate into strong positions before the next circle closes, but that depends on the phase of the circle, okay? If it's like the last couple of zones, then you don't want to be using a vehicle if at all possible, because that's just going to tell people exactly where you are. Don't drive straight into a fight. Park your vehicle behind cover and move on foot. Snowmobiles and bikes are fast but loud. Enemies will hear you coming and you are easy to take out on a bike or a snowmobile. Don't forget, you can kill your engine by pressing Z, so you can coast into zone and compounds quietly. If you're in the late game, ditch your vehicle before reaching the final circles. It'll only give away your position. Okay, that's a massive one. When I'm recording PUBG spectating videos, the amount of people that drive vehicles into the final zone and then get annihilated because they get out of the car and people have watched them drive that vehicle into the zone. Okay, it's just crazy how many people do that. So just to quickly recap this, always plan your movements early. Don't get caught by the zone. Try to stay center zone so you don't have to rotate so much. Use cover and high ground to stay safe and get better angles. Rotate smartly with vehicles, but don't rely on them too much and try not to use them in the end zones. Now that we've discussed positioning, let's move on to fighting strategies and how to engage enemies. In PUBG, every fight is a risk. Taking unnecessary battles can get you eliminated early, but choosing the right fights can help you survive longer and get more kills. And let's face it, everybody wants a high kill win. Let's go over how to engage wisely, control your shots, and avoid reckless mistakes. Only engage when necessary. Not every fight is worth taking. If you shoot at the wrong time, you might give away your position and attract third parties. Instead, wait for the right moment. This could be if an enemy is out in the open and an easy kill. If you have good cover and the enemy doesn't, that's particularly important in relation to the previous point that I've just made about the enemy being out in the open. Yeah, cover is essential in this game. If you don't have the right cover, then you're screwed. And that's why also using the tilt function is important. I've actually changed my tilt function. I've still got it set up to Q and E, but I've got it on toggle because I don't like having to hold that key to keep that tilt in place. Okay, so mess around with your key binds as well and stuff like that, just to see what you prefer. If you can third party a fight, do it. Let the enemies weaken each other before striking. And if you strike at just the right point, you can get both of those kills and you can steal both of those kills. And also, if you do that, be prepared that when you go to loot them, they're going to give you some serious grief because people don't like third partying, but it's just part of the game. And people just have to get the hang of it and get used to it because that's part of it. When to hold back. If you're in a bad position with no cover, okay, if you don't have cover and there's somebody ahead of you and they haven't seen you, just let them carry on. Okay, you do not want to pick that fight because they could be better than you with the gun in general, but also there's a good chance they might get to cover better than you. Yeah. If the zone is closing in and you don't have time for a fight, this is particularly important from about phase 4 onwards, particularly phase 5, okay? Because that tick rate on that damage that zone's going to do to you is very high, okay? So if possible, wait until you get into the zone, and then if it's safe to do so, take the fight on, okay? If you're low on ammo or healing items, survival is more important. Again, if they haven't seen you, let them go about the business and wait until you're in a better situation in terms of your loot. Yeah. Now, obviously, if you can get the kill instantly, yeah, take the kill, because then you can go and loot them. But if it's a chance that you're going to have to actually have a genuine fight, yeah, let them go about the business. Hopefully they won't notice you. If they do, you're going to have to fight them. One of the most important things about PUBG is that spraying and praying does not work, okay? Controlling your recoil is massive in PUBG, okay? Because it means landing your shots, and that'll win you the fights. That's why when you start out, I recommend using something like the MP5K, okay? Because the recoil is very little. And then as you get more experience, start playing with more guns. So I didn't like the barrel when I first started playing PUBG because it's got one of the highest recoils in the game. But now I actually really enjoy using it, especially if I get a muzzle and I get a vertical grip or something like that. I really do enjoy using it because it's high risk, high reward. You need a lot of skill to control the recoil, but the damage from it is much better. So learn to control that recoil and you're going to win a lot more fights. You can do that by using burst fire or tap shooting for medium to long range fights. Okay, if you're not very good with the recoil control, use the trigger mechanisms. Okay, pulling down slightly on your mouse is obviously the main way to control your recoil. But I highly recommend watching some of C-Dome's videos to help set up your mouse sensitivities, okay? He explains how you can go into the firing range and tweak and tune your mouse sensitivities. I do that occasionally. I need to do it more often, actually, because every time I do it, it gets slightly better. But C-Dome's got some great instructional videos, so I highly recommend going and watching some of his videos. Attaching the right grips. Like I just mentioned, a half grip or a vertical grip will help with recoil control. Avoid the angle foregrip. It's just a complete and utter waste of time. Lightweight grip is particularly good on semi-auto weapons. So weapons that aren't fully auto. It helps you recenter a lot faster. Okay, so the lightweight grip gets shunned by a lot of people. And I think it was C-Dome that I learned this from, actually. But it does help you center that fire between shots on semi-auto weapons. Okay. If you have a compensator or suppressor, use it. These attachments help with accuracy and keep you hitting. Personally, I prefer compensators. The muzzle brake help with visual recoil, but I'm more interested in recoil control, okay? I'm not too concerned about visual recoil because to me, that's just visual. I much prefer the compensator because that literally has a direct impact on the recoil itself. I will only really use a suppressor on a sniper. That's the only time I really use suppressors. Other than that, I'm not really interested in them. Hold angles instead of rushing. Okay, one of the biggest mistakes beginners make is rushing blindly into fights. Instead, hold angles and force enemies to come to you. Streamers will hate me saying this, okay? Because streamers have got 10,000 hours experience in this game. Okay, so they're confident rushing fights. And you'll have all seen it if you're into watching streams. You get the streamer and all they do is they kick off about the guy that was holding the angle. Well, I'm sorry, mate. You've just been outplayed. And it's as simple as that. Yeah? Just because you've got 10,000 hours in this game and all of a sudden you're feeling overconfident and you push into a building and there's a guy holding an angle because he heard your footsteps because the audio on this game actually works. Yeah? He's outplayed you. Yeah, you should have checked, breached, and cleared the building before you went storming in. All right? So, hold those angles. You are a noob. Yeah? It's one of the biggest mistakes beginners make is rushing blindly into fights. Pre-aim a doorway or corners where enemies might appear. Hold high ground fighting from above gives you a big advantage. The time to push is if you've cracked an enemy's armor. Okay, so if you see a lot of blood come off them, then you can push to finish that fight because they're going to be either medding up or they're going to take cover. Yeah, if they are medding up, they're going to have to cancel that medding when they hear you pushing them, and then they are very weak. So you instantly have that advantage. If the enemy is trapped inside a building with no escape, so this is what I was on about earlier on. I like to be in buildings, but you can get trapped. So you need to make sure that building is safe to be in. So like the little huts and stuff like that, that's an instant Molotov. You know, those little huts in the middle of nowhere, people are just going to Molotov that. If they think there's somebody in there, they're going to Molotov that, and then you've got to rush out and they're going to be pre-aiming that door. If you don't die to the Molotov, because it'll kill you very fast. If the zone is closing and they have no choice but to run towards you, you want to push that fight. They are at the disadvantage. You see the similarity, the common denominator in all of these is when they are at a disadvantage. Either they've got damage to them, if they're injured, if they're trapped, or if the zone is pushing them into play. Again, that's particularly important in the end zone. You need to be pushing those fights because they are under pressure. They have an issue, so they're having to fight two issues at once, essentially. So to recap this section, don't take unnecessary fights, third-party enemies for an easy advantage, control your recoil with bursts and attachments, and hold angles instead of rushing. Force enemies into bad positions. Now that you know how to fight smart, let's move on to the final and most important step, how to win the endgame and secure that chicken dinner. You've made it to the final circles, now it's time to clutch the win. The endgame in PUBG is all about staying calm, using cover wisely, and making smart plays. Let's break down exactly what you need to do to secure that chicken dinner. In the final circles, positioning is everything. If you're caught in the open, you're an easy target. Instead, find solid cover and move only when necessary. Use the cover available. We've already discussed this in previous areas of this video, shall we say. Okay, so you got rocks and trees, buildings, etc. But let's not forget the ditches and snowbanks that we discussed earlier on. Okay, those natural dips and hollows in the terrain. When you are in an end zone in PUBG, a lot of the time it is out in the open. For some reason, the game seems to prefer to put the end zone in the open area. Use those natural undulations in the ground. People neglect those and don't realize that they're there. Also, don't forget there are deployable covers. Okay, they are massively underutilized, including by myself. Yeah, deployable covers are awesome. Yeah, you can just flip them straight up and instantly you've got some cover to work behind. And then you've also got emergency cover flares. The disadvantage of the emergency cover flares is they do take a while to come in, but also it's also cover for the enemy as well. Okay, so you're sort of providing an advantage to everybody. Always rotate early. Moving last forces you into bad decisions. If the next circle is in the open, position near natural cover before it shrinks. Okay, don't be forced, like we talked about earlier on. Don't be forced to rotate. Do it when it's natural. The other thing is, particularly in end zone, this is particularly important. Try to avoid laying prone. I know that this is going to be ironic because I actually win this match by laying prone. Okay, but that's because the situation called for it. Laying prone is a massively disadvantageous thing to do in this game because your movement is massively hindered by laying prone. Okay, as soon as somebody starts shooting at you, you're pretty much dead because it takes so long to complete the animation to get out of laying prone. You can't spin very fast whilst you're laid prone, so try to avoid laying prone. Not only that, but whilst you're crouching, you can be bobbing backwards and forwards, up and down to figure out where people are in that end zone. You are gathering intel. Whilst you're laying prone, you can't do that. It's very difficult to get intel whilst you're laying prone. Speaking of crouching, make sure you crouch walk instead of sprint. Avoid going prone if possible. Yeah, like I say, it's a serious thing is laying prone in PUBG. So crouch walk, and don't forget you can slow crouch walk by, I think the keybind is caps lock, but I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, so you can really muffle your steps by doing that. Use a suppressor on your weapons to avoid drawing attention. Not essential, but if you've got one in your backpack, you might as well equip it. And don't reload or heal in the open. Move behind cover first. Not only that, but if it's a 1v1 situation, be aware that the enemy can hear if you reload a weapon or if you apply, for example, a first aid kit. They will hear that sound. And as soon as they hear that, they're going to push you because they know you're weak. If the zone forces you out, rotate carefully from cover to cover. If two enemies are fighting, use the distraction to reposition or engage. This is particularly important. When two enemies are fighting in PUBG, they're not really paying attention to their surroundings, especially in the final zone. try to force the last, so if it's a 1v1v1 situation, try to force the last two enemies to start fighting each other, because that instantly puts you at the advantage in the final fight. So it's down to you and one other player. This is where the nerves kick in. Stay calm, play smart, and take the fight on your turn. Pre-aim likely spots. If you don't see the enemy, aim where they're most likely hiding. Use throwables such as grenades and molotovs to force enemies out of cover. Okay, as you get more experienced, it becomes, there's like a thing in PUBG where spamming utilities is really frowned upon. But to get your first win, just do it. Yeah, it's your first win. Spam those utilities, okay? You're going to do everything possible to get that win. So don't be ashamed of spamming those utilities. Force them out of the cover, yeah? Stay patient. Let the enemy make the first mistake. If they panic and run, that's your chance to strike. Just play savvy. Don't be going crazy. Don't be doing anything stupid. Just take your time and enjoy the game, basically. And finally, if you have the zone advantage, hold your position and let the enemy come to you. You don't need to be searching and seeking like mad. Okay, like I say, stay crouched and gather that intel best you can, but don't be rushing around. Don't be, making a big deal out of the situation. Just be aware. Listen for footsteps. Listen for any kind of medding up and anything like that. If you're outside the zone, use smoke grenades and move strategically to better cover. Yeah, spam those smokes. Smokes also cover up your footsteps a little bit. So to recap, stay inside the final zone and position yourself with cover. Stay quiet, avoid unnecessary movement and noise. Avoid medding up unless you are sure that nobody's around you. Obviously, sometimes you have to, but if it's a 1v1 situation, you might be better off just keeping quiet until they move. And in 1v1 fights, pre-aim, use grenades, and stay calm. Like I said at the beginning of this video, winning in PUBG isn't just about aim. It's about strategy, positioning, and making smart decisions. The only way to get better is to play the game. Don't be put off because you suck. Keep practicing these tips, and soon enough, you'll be celebrating your first chicken dinner. If this guide has helped you, make sure to like the video, follow or subscribe for more PUBG content, and drop a comment below with any advice you might have, whether you're a noob or not. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Get out there, get into PUBG, and claim that victory. Until the next one, cheers for now.